Tonight on the Daily Debrief, notes from brother to brother in a case where one is accused of murdering the rest of the family, all over an obsession with a Bulgarian webcam girl. And strange conversations between a college student who admits killing her mother and stepfather and her college roommates.
She told me her mom just died, and I said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. What happened?"
Plus, deliberations over the death of a foster child. Is it accident or murder? The Daily Debrief recaps the day in court. It's Monday, July 29th.
Welcome to the Debrief, everybody. Aaron Keller along with Michael Bryant. How are you today?
Good. How about you?
I'm very good. David Schoen will be joining us as well in just a moment here. Testimony surrounding phones and computers and questions about whether a defendant tried to cover his tracks in the case of a Florida man accused of killing his family after he stole their money and sent it to a Bulgarian webcam model. 29-year-old Grant Amato is accused of sending the woman $200,000 from his mother Margaret, his father Chad, and his brother Cody so that she would keep talking to him. When his parents intervened and tried to shut down the so-called relationship, prosecutors say he murdered his family and then tried to cash in on their life insurance policies. Prosecutors say the webcam woman, known only as Sylvia, was the defendant's obsession. No one knows if Sylvia is even her real name. An investigator who works with digital devices testified that the defendant appears to have tried to wipe data off his brother Cody's phone.
My phone with a particular serial number was connected to Grant's computer at 11:39 p.m. According to the Apple system logs, the lockdown file was not, iTunes was not able to find the lockdown file. I noticed at 11:42 p.m. An iPhone was connected to, an iPhone with the same UDID, unique identifier, was connected to this computer in recovery mode.
Do you have an opinion as to what was being attempted on Cody's iPhone?
Based on everything else that I examined, I believe the person was trying to wipe the phone. So these were the first 10 files and folders copied into the thumb drive, in this case, in case of downloads and 2011 and 2015. You have the date when these files were created, or in this volume, so in the thumb drive, which is January 24th, 2019 at 11:33 Eastern Standard Time, or starting at 11:33.
And the last box contains the last 10 files, is that so?
In a similar manner, yes. The last 10 files and folders copied along with the creation date and logical size.
And when was the last file moved over?
On January 25th, 2019 at 12:27 a.m.
That same investigator looked into activity on the mother's laptop.
Can you tell the jury when the last time there was any user or human generated activity on that laptop?
Yes, January 24th, 2019 at 4:44 p.m.
So, Investigator Bly, is it fair to say that from 4:44 on January 24th, 2019, no human being did anything to that laptop?
Yes, that's correct.
Does that include turning it off?
Yes, it does.
The prosecution is arguing that Grant Amato spent a lot of time searching about how to reset computer and phone passwords. This is a list of what investigators found, and the numbers of searches were up in the hundreds.
Number 148. Windows 10 won't accept password at login. That's on there too, correct?
Yes, sir.
Number 152. How to easily reset your Windows 10 password if you forgot it. 2018. That's on there too, correct?
Correct.
Number 160. Bypass or reset password, Windows 8 or 10. That's on there too, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's also on January 19th of 2019.
Yes, sir.
Number 161. Bypass or reset password, Windows 8 or 10 to download free. That's also on there, correct?
Yes, sir.
Also on January 19th of 2019, correct?
Correct.
Number 178. Windows doesn't accept my password after updating. That's on there as well, correct?
Correct.
Number 180. Password not recognized. These are all continuous Google searches for password resets and bypassing a password, correct?
For Windows 10.
Correct. So Mr. Amato does a lot of searches on his phone about password reset, correct?
He did on those dates. Yes, sir.
Let's switch gears now and talk about other writings here. One of the defendant's brothers wrote him this note offering to help after the defendant had been kicked out of the family home.
It begins, brother, they just told me what happened. Dad told you to pack your and get out of his house because you were caught texting that woman again. Grant, I'll take care of all your problems. I just need you back. I can't live without you, brother. I said I'd take care of all your problems at the house, and I have. No one will bother you again regarding this. Just please come home. I can't do this again. If you think I'm part of the problem here, then I've really lost you, and I can't take that loss after everything. There is nothing I can say to change your mind on this. I love you, O22, that's spelled OTOU-TOU, and I wish you felt the same. I was going to come after you again, but what's the point?
Now, that note is not to be confused with another note. Authorities say they recovered from a hotel room and apparently written by the defendant himself after the shootings. Here, a crime scene analyst reads what he found.
I miss being at home already, and it's only been one day since I was kicked out by Dad. Cody said he'd take care of it, but there is nothing he could do about this. I miss the house and comfort, but the atmosphere had been getting worse and worse. Cody sounded pretty sad, and I told him that it's over at the house. We had a good 29 years, and I wish it could work out. Looks like I finally have to live on my own, ... Sadly, Cody is still helping me by giving me his debit until I can get settled. Oh, and the interview went well today. Oh, and no phone service because Dad canceled it. Parentheses, tough days. And then dated January 25th, 2019.
The family gave the defendant a written ultimatum about his activities with Sylvia, the webcam girl, as the defendant's one surviving brother testified.
It looks like Grant chose to live at home. He understood that the family would not cover or pay any current remaining future debts, etc. Some rules are no post-midnight internet use, no more all-nighters online, limited TV, install a new AT&T modem for logging, wireless, and hard traffic use. It says that he terminated his current phone and set him up with a new phone that I guess didn't have data or the ability to go on the internet. Some responsibilities where he had to get a job. He had some debts that he had to take care of. No savings. He owed the family some money, owed the family an apology. It states that it informed Grant that they had reached out to this woman to let them know, or to let her know some of the things that Grant had been saying weren't 100% true, and that he wasn't allowed to communicate with her anymore based off of those lies. It's very detailed.
With me tonight are attorneys David Schoen from Atlanta and Michael Bryant here in New York. So David, let me start with you. We go from notes like that, delivering an ultimatum, to those other notes we heard. It's note after note after note, it seems. And then we get to the passwords being reset on the phone and on the computer. Is this a guy who's covering his tracks here, ultimately?
It looks like it. I mean, I don't even understand the nature of the note that they found that Grant had written himself. Not clear who he's writing it to. It looks like he's covering his tracks, and he says Cody's still letting him use the debit card. I'm a little confused in this case what Grant's defense intends to be. On the face of it, there's a lot of ammunition for a mental health defense here. The parents reported him as suicidal, in a depressive state, just a month before the murder in this case. He had an earlier problem, which his lawyer sought to exclude, which also would have opened the door to this mental health defense. So clearly they're going for broke on the innocence defense in this case. And I don't know if that's because Grant fought a mental health defense. They didn't feel the evidence supported it. They couldn't get an expert. In this case, it may be that Grant is going to testify. If they're really going for broke, I think he's got to.
Wow, that's a bold prediction. Michael Bryant, what's your take? I mean, at one point we heard this possibility of maybe like some kind of a drug defense if somebody else did this because they found marijuana growing at a very small scale in the family's house. I mean, at one point was the defense just going to point the finger at somebody else completely?
Yeah, that seemed a little far-fetched. There's no evidence that it was a drug operation. It was apparently for personal use and not even very active. So it sounds more like they're going with the Cody did this and then killed himself, which is equally far-fetched based on the evidence we've seen so far. It just doesn't seem to make sense.
Yeah, exactly, David. That was one of the possible theories here. You know, the state was saying, oh, it looked like the brother who died in the attack was posed, and that was the state's theory early on in this. Oh, someone moved his body to make it look like he was the perpetrator. Is the defense going to say flat out, well, he was the perpetrator, and you've got this whole theory wrong that the body was moved?
Could be, and that note supports it. He was really beside himself that Grant had left, and they felt they had lost Grant. They clearly were close. Grant had disappeared in Japan. We learned earlier today Cody went to find him. And Grant is a real gun buff. So it's not far-fetched to suggest that he could have posed it. While he's doing the anime, he also may have read a number of mystery novels. And his whole life appears to be acting out what he reads about, sees it on TV or otherwise.
You know, David, you raise an interesting point because the question of the defendant's access and skill as far as weapons, the defense was saying during the openings, oh, he wasn't a trained shooter and everything, but there are pictures of him all over the internet using guns. Okay, well, maybe he didn't take formal training, but it seemed to me that maybe he was self-taught or he had some kind of dexterity with weapons. So a lot to come yet in this case. Gentlemen, we'll be back with you at the end of the broadcast here. A jury, of course, is deliberating the fate of a Georgia husband and wife accused of murdering their 2-year-old foster child. Joseph and Jennifer Rosenbaum face different degrees of murder and other charges over the death of Layla Marie Daniel. The defendant said the little girl died accidentally after choking on a piece of chicken and that she was further injured during CPR. The state said Layla likely died after a seizure, which was probably triggered by abuse. No word yet how late that jury will go. Still ahead tonight here on The Debrief, the case of a Florida college student accused of murder. Some roommates are testifying for the state, some for the defense. Find out what they had to say about the mother the defendant accuses of abusing her to the point she snapped. Day 3 of the trial of a Florida woman who says voices in her head led her to kill her mother and stepfather. Nicole Nachtman is raising an insanity defense involving schizophrenia. She's also raising battered child syndrome as self-defense, saying she was beaten and finally snapped back. Nachtman confessed that she drove home from Florida State University, shot both of the victims, and then drove back to college. So, a series of roommates have testified, and the first one testified out of order for the defense. She explained via video conference that there were issues between the defendant and her mother.
Did you and Nicole talk about the major that she had, that she was taking at FSU?
Yeah, she told me that she was taking public relations with a minor in history.
And did she tell you that she had to change her major?
Yeah, she told me that she wanted to be a history major, but her mom told her that she couldn't be a history major, that there was no, I guess, career path in that major, and so she had to switch to public relations.
And did Ms. Nachtman talk to you about having had plastic surgery, specifically liposuction, because of being body shamed by her mother?
Yes, she did tell me about her plastic surgery, and therefore that's why she had to wear like tight pantyhose to keep everything together.
Did she also talk to you about changing her grades and the reason why she was changing her grades?
Yes, so when she wasn't doing good in school, I know that she would have to change her grades herself or try to figure it out. One time she was like really freaking out because her mom wanted a report saying what her grades were. And so she was calling her, asking her, and she was trying to figure out how to change. I think it was a C to a B or some minor change, but she needed to change her grades.
Next, the defense asked that roommate about the defendant's relationship with her mother in general.
I know that she felt very controlled by her mother. They didn't have the best relationship. The few times that I would hear them on the phone, it was very argumentative. I would always step out of the room because I didn't feel comfortable to listen to somebody else's phone call. But it was more very timid. She wouldn't answer back, and I would just hear her mom. And so our walls weren't that thick, and I would just go to the common area.
Was it your impression that Ms. Nachtman feared repercussions from her mother based on perhaps failures that she had going on in school?
Yes, I know that she was very scared not to be successful in her grades or anything, so she would try to make sure to do her best, but sometimes, her outcomes were short.
And during the time periods that y'all were in school together and roommates together, whenever holidays would come up like Christmas or Thanksgiving or spring break, what was your impression of Nicole in terms of returning home for those time periods?
I know that she wasn't really excited to go home because her mom would want her to be someone that she isn't. She would say that her mom would make her get her nails done or do her hair, and that's not really who she was. She would wait till the last possible minute to leave.
The other two roommates who testified in this case testified earlier for the prosecution. One said the defendant asked her to lie about the defendant's whereabouts and claimed, this is from the defendant of course, that the mother was in a car accident.
She had said that she wanted me to say that she had moved in the day before.
Okay, did she tell you who she wanted you to say that to?
I guess if anyone asked.
All right, did you find that strange?
I did. I didn't see anybody asking me that type of question, so I didn't think it was that important. She said to me that her mom was recently in a car accident of some sort. I'm not exactly sure where it happened, but I assumed that it was in her hometown, Tampa.
Anything else you can recall her telling you that specifically stands out in your mind?
I know she said that, I don't know if she was on the phone with a PI or private investigator, but that's about all I remember her saying, that she was in conversation with a PI. I don't know if they're investigating the car accident or something else. I'm not exactly sure.
All right. How did she seem that time? Did she seem nervous, excited, happy, sad? Any particular emotion that you noticed?
She seemed rather normal. I mean, maybe because she was sweating, maybe she was nervous or something of the sort, but she did seem rather okay, she wasn't sad or happy or anything like that.
Another roommate testified for the state and said the defendant was barely prepared for her living situation there at college. Plus, the defendant made an odd comment about her mother, who by this time was a victim.
So I walked into the dorm room, and my intentions were to pack up my things, and because I had got a spot in permanent housing, and I was surprised to see a new roommate in there. She was sitting up on the top bunk. My bed was the lower one. There was no sheets on the bed. I saw a suitcase open and empty on the floor, and she was just sitting up there with a blanket wrapped around her.
Okay. Did you talk to her at all?
Yeah, I was very nice. I introduced myself. We shook hands. I noticed that she was upset, so I asked her what was wrong, and she told me her mom just died. And I said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. What happened?" And she said, "I don't know. Detectives are flying in later." And I said, "Okay, well, I understand if you don't want to be around anybody right now, but my dad and my sister are about to come up here to help me pack my things and move into my permanent dorm." And she didn't say anything. She just got up and left, and I never saw her again.
Okay, so that was the only interaction you had with Nicole Nachtman?
Yes.
Since then, have you had any more contact with Nicole Nachtman or the police?
No.
Returning now, our attorneys Michael Bryant and David Schoen. So David, what's going on here? We got multiple stories from these roommates. One is just painting the picture of the relationship between the defendant and the mother. These other two, you know, one's hearing stories about a car accident. The other is, well, the mother died and detectives want to talk to the defendant. What's going on with all this testimony?
Well, that testimony makes Miss Nachtman look conniving. I'm a little confused about the defense. On the one hand, the defense is one of schizophrenia. She heard voices. That's what led her to do it. And in Florida, it's the Manhattan rule. That is, she was unable to distinguish between right or wrong, or otherwise didn't understand her conduct because of a disease of the mind. On the other hand, she's also raising battered child syndrome as a matter of self-defense. Those two mens rea, those two frames of mind are inconsistent in my view. If she were schizophrenic at the time, unable to recognize right from wrong, etc., she really couldn't have formed the mental state to think she was under siege by her mother and therefore acted in self-defense. It seems to me. I don't understand it. Sometimes we see lawyers throwing in the kitchen sink, hoping that something sticks. These roommates, though, support the idea that she was in a frame of mind to know, it's certainly afterwards, what she had done and was conniving.
Yeah, exactly. That was the next question I was going to ask here. Exactly. You know, what's going on with this split defense? Because I agree with you, David. This doesn't make any sense to me. Michael Bryant, does it make sense to you?
Well, you know, you do have the right to argue alternative theories. Now, hopefully they support one another in some way. In this case, it's kind of you take the left road or you take the right road. And talking about...
And never do they diverge again.
The right road in this case would be this battered child syndrome, in my opinion. But so far, and I know the one witness for the defense was called out of order. We're going to hear much more from the defense in this case, but certainly there needs to be a bunch more. Some real abuse, not like, I've never heard the mommy made me get liposuction abuse. That's odd.
Yeah, that's a new one for me, too.
You know, but there also is going to need to be much more for a jury to believe that this person was battered to the point where she felt she needed self-defense against her own parents.
Exactly. Okay, so David, I was going to go there as well. I mean, plastic surgery, body shaming, pressure about grades. I mean, is this just a helicopter mother who maybe is a little overbearing, or is this something that rises to the level that the defendant wants us to believe it is?
Right. Well, remember, the self-defense has to be from fear of imminent bodily harm, use of deadly force. In this case, yelling at her about her grades or even kicking her out of the house or cutting her off wouldn't support a self-defense use of deadly force type defense. That part of it's crazy. It seems to me that if she's going to go with schizophrenia, she has to go all the way, but she's going to have to make this case with an expert for sure.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, you get kicked out of the house, that doesn't mean you can necessarily pull the trigger on someone. Michael Bryant, so, you know, this is going to be interesting to see where the defense goes with this, to see if we start to get it, because right now it seems that we're unanimous in not getting it.
Yeah, they've got to do a lot more to bring it into focus, because this jury is going to be lost.
Exactly. Okay, so Michael Bryant, David Schoen, appreciate your insight here on the debrief. And of course, this case will roll along. We will wait and see how the other witnesses look when they are called in order. That's it for us. We'll be back tomorrow at 5. Have a good evening.